It is the dead of night in the broken, debris-choked streets of a ruined Jerusalem, and a prophet is being shaken awake by an angel. Zechariah opens his eyes, expecting to see the dust and the scorched stones of a city Babylon destroyed 70 years ago. Instead, he sees a machine constructed of solid gold, a lampstand, massive and completely alien to the wreckage around him, burning with a quiet, unearthly fire. Read that again. This is not a vision of comfort. It is an impossible, mechanical anomaly. And it holds the terrifying blueprint for a light that feeds itself, bypassing every human priest, to connect directly to two mysterious figures who carry the full weight of the apocalypse. Zechariah chapter 4, verses 1 through 3 in the King James Version records the awakening, "And the angel that talked with me came again and waked me, as a man that is wakened out of his sleep, and said unto me, What seest thou? And I said, I have looked, and behold a candlestick all of gold, with a bowl upon the top of it, and his 7 lamps thereon, and 7 pipes to the 7 lamps, which are upon the top thereof, and 2 olive trees by it, one upon the right side of the bowl, and the other upon the left side thereof." Stop right there. Picture it. You are standing in the skeletal remains of the Second Temple. The foundation has barely been laid. There are no walls. There is no roof. There is no holy place to protect a sacred object from the desert wind. Yet, right here in the dirt stands a menorah that fundamentally shatters the ancient laws of the priesthood. Flavius Josephus, the 1st century Roman Jewish historian, wrote in his Antiquities of the Jews about the sheer, visceral awe the golden lampstand commanded in the ancient world. He recorded that its 7 branches represented the planets, a cosmic map wrought in hammered metal. It was the very center of Jewish ritual life. In Exodus 27, Aaron and his sons were commanded to tend that light from evening to morning. It was a manual, exhausting, holy labor. They had to crush the olives, they had to carry the oil, they had to trim the blackened wicks. The fire died if the priest failed. But the object Zechariah is staring at is not the lampstand Josephus described. It is a mutation. Moses built a menorah that required human hands. Zechariah is looking at a candlestick with a bowl upon the top of it. In Hebrew, that word is gola, a massive, golden reservoir hovering above the branches. And from this reservoir, an intricate system of pipes feeds directly into the 7 lamps. No priest required. The system is entirely closed, entirely self-sufficient, and it draws its fuel directly from 2 living olive trees planted on its left and its right. It is an unceasing flow of oil, pulled straight from the living wood into the blinding fire. A perpetual motion machine of spirit and flame, sitting in the rubble of a dead city. Zechariah is staring at a fire that human hands are not allowed to touch. But the true anomaly is not the gold, and it is not the bowl. What happens when you look past the burning lamps and realize exactly what is bleeding into those pipes? Step into the blinding sand of the Sinai desert, centuries before Babylon burned Jerusalem to the ground. Exodus chapter 27, verse 20. God gives Moses the absolute blueprint for the light that must never go out in the holy place. "And thou shalt command the children of Israel, that they bring thee pure oil, olive beaten for the light, to cause the lamp to burn always." Read that carefully. Beaten. The Hebrew word anchored in that verse is katith. It means crushed, bruised in a mortar, pulverized by human hands. It took brutal, exhausting physical force to extract the precise grade of fuel required for the tabernacle. Aaron and his sons, the consecrated priests, were commanded to stand before that golden lampstand every evening and every morning. They trimmed the blackened wicks. They cleared the ash. They hauled the heavy earthen vessels of Kattith to keep the flame alive. If the priests slept, the light died. If the human hands failed, the sanctuary plunged into darkness. Now, look back at the mechanical anomaly Zechariah sees in the dead of night among the ruins of the Second Temple. The priest is entirely missing. In Zechariah 4:2, the prophet describes the anatomy of this impossible object, a candlestick, all of gold, with a bowl upon the top of it, and his 7 lamps thereon, and 7 pipes to the 7 lamps. The Hebrew word used for those pipes is mutzakah. It means a casting, a poured-out conduit. These 7 conduits reach up and lock directly into the gullah, the massive golden reservoir hovering above the structure. But there is no Levite climbing a ladder to fill that bowl. There is no stone mortar. There are no bruised olives. Instead, Zechariah sees something that shatters the boundaries of Levitical law. Verse 3 reads, "And 2 olive trees by it, one upon the right side of the bowl, and the other upon the left side thereof." Sit with that image. Trees have roots. Trees pull their life from the deep earth. Trees are alive. The menorah Moses built in the wilderness was a static object of hammered gold, fueled by the dead fruit of distant orchards, processed by dying men. What Zechariah sees is a living, breathing ecosystem. The branches of these 2 olive trees are somehow bleeding directly into the golden pipes. The oil bypasses the press. It bypasses the bruising. It bypasses the hands of Aaron and his sons entirely. The Babylonian Talmud, in Tractate Menashot 86b, records exactly how obsessive the ancient priesthood was regarding this oil. They required only the very first drop from the olives perched at the very crown of the tree. The preparation was a masterclass in human striving, human purification, and human control over the sacred. Zechariah's vision violently bypasses that control. To an Orthodox priest standing in the rubble of 520 BC, this image borders on the scandalous. It is a temple ritual executing itself without human mediation. God is showing a devastated post-exile people a system of divine illumination that does not rely on their broken infrastructure. Their temple is currently a pile of rocks. Their priesthood is scattered, weak, and compromised. Yet the fire is burning. But a golden machine that feeds itself from living trees begs a deeply unsettling question. Zechariah is staring at the wood, the bark, the leaves, and the oil. But he knows he is not just looking at agriculture. He asks the angel twice to explain what these 2 trees actually are. And the angel's answer hinges on a single Hebrew word that the English translation entirely obscures. Zechariah pushes the angel. He asks the question twice. He sees the gold. He sees the unquenchable fire, but he cannot pull his eyes away from the wood. Zechariah chapter 4, verse 11. "Then answered I, and said unto him, What are these 2 olive trees? Upon the right side of the candlestick and upon the left side thereof." He presses further in verse 12, noticing the violent, intimate connection between the living bark and the cold metal. He asks about the 2 olive branches, which, through the 2 golden pipes, empty the golden oil out of themselves. Watch what the text does. The wood is bleeding directly into the gold. The angel finally answers in verse 14. "Then said he, These are the 2 anointed ones that stand by the Lord of the whole earth." Stop right there. In the English translation, that phrasing feels safe. Anointed ones. If you read the rest of the Old Testament, you know exactly how a man becomes anointed. A prophet takes a horn of oil, pours it over a man's head, and the Spirit of God rushes in. The Hebrew word for that standard, ritually prepared oil, is shemen. It is stored in clay jars. It is mixed by apothecaries. The word for the man who receives it is Mashiach, a Messiah, an anointed one. Moses consecrated Aaron with Shemen. Samuel anointed David with Shemen. But read the Hebrew of Zechariah 4:14. The angel does not call them Mashiach, and he does not use the word Shemen. The phrase in the original text is Bene ha-Yitzar, sons of the fresh oil. Yitzar is not standard temple oil. It is not something you store in the dark for months. Yitzar is the fresh, raw, shining liquid bursting straight from the crushed fruit. It is the absolute peak of the harvest's vitality, untouched by human ritual, untampered with by the priesthood. It is uncontrollable, wild life. And these two figures are not merely anointed with it. The angel calls them the sons of it. Sit with that distinction. An anointed man receives a temporary pouring from a human priest. A son of the shining oil is something else entirely. These two figures are intrinsically tied to the living trees that feed the unstoppable golden machine. They do not need an earthly priest to validate them. They are bypassing the entire Levitical system to stand directly by the Lord of the whole earth. This terrified and fascinated the ancient scholars. Who could possibly hold the right to bypass the temple system? In Zechariah's immediate day, the answer seemed historical. There were two men tasked with rebuilding the ruined city: Joshua, the high priest, and Zerubbabel, the governor from the bloodline of David. One held the spiritual authority. One held the royal authority. Two olive branches feeding the same light. But the text refuses to stay locked in 520 BC. The angel does not call them a priest and a king. He calls them the sons of the fresh oil. And that strange, hyper-specific Hebrew phrase began to haunt the generations that followed. It created an expectation that could not be satisfied by two ordinary men stacking stones in a broken Jerusalem. Two branches, two conduits, one unquenchable fire. But what happens when an ancient Jewish sect takes this exact blueprint, walks away from a corrupted temple, and waits in the desert for these two figures to finally arrive? Who exactly were the men of the Dead Sea Scrolls expecting to step out of the shadows? Picture the limestone cliffs above the Dead Sea. 2,000 years ago, a community of exiled Jewish priests has walked away from the very temple in Jerusalem that Zechariah helped rebuild. They believe the sanctuary is defiled. They believe the priesthood is corrupt. So they pack up their sacred scrolls, march into the barren wilderness of Qumran, and wait. What exactly are they waiting for? In 1947, Bedouin shepherds shattered a clay jar in those exact caves and pulled out the Dead Sea Scrolls, sealed in the dark for 2 millennia. Among those brittle, carbon-inked parchments is a foundational text called the Community Rule. It was the absolute survival guide for this desert sect, and written in column 9, line 11, is a startling command. The writers declare that they will live by their strict, isolated desert laws until the coming of the prophet and the messiahs of Aaron and Israel. Read that again, messiahs, plural. The Western mind is entirely trained to look for one singular savior, one king, one deliverer. But the men of Qumran were staring directly at the blueprint of Zechariah chapter 4. They remembered the gold, the floating bowl, and the two living trees. They knew that a singular king could not fulfill the vision of the dual conduits. I hold this as their telling, not as proven fact. But the Qumran sect read the sons of the fresh oil as a dual prophecy for the end of days. They expected a Messiah of Aaron, a high priest to cleanse the spiritual rot, and a Messiah of Israel, a royal king from the line of David to crush their physical enemies. Two figures, two conduits, one apocalyptic fire. Go back to the canonical text, Zechariah 4, 14 inches the KJV. The angel points to the bleeding branches and says, "These are the two anointed ones, that stand by the Lord of the whole earth. The men of the Dead Sea Scrolls knew history. They knew Joshua the high priest and Zerubbabel the governor had lived, rebuilt the stone foundation of the Second Temple, and died. But the golden machine Zechariah saw was eternal. It did not break down when the men of 520 BC went to their graves. The Qumran sect believed the true Yitzhar, the uncrushed, wild, shining oil of God's presence, was waiting to bypass the corrupted Herodian temple of their day and pour directly into these two final figures. They were waiting for the golden pipes to open. But there is a massive problem with this militant desert expectation. A king and a priest leading an earthly rebellion need an army. They need swords. They need physical leverage and violent force to overthrow an empire. Yet, Zechariah's vision completely strips away human power. The angel tells the prophet that this impossible, self-feeding lampstand operates on a terrifyingly different frequency. God is about to hand Zechariah a weapon, but it is not a sword. Two messiahs waiting in the desert wings, and an endless supply of golden oil bypassing the earthly priests. But the angel pulls Zechariah's eyes away from the living trees and points him toward a heavy piece of lead in the governor's hand. How does a man with a simple stone plummet flatten a literal mountain of opposition without drawing a single blade? Look down at the dirt. Zechariah is still staring at the bleeding trees and the golden pipes, but the angel violently shifts the prophet's gaze. He points away from the unquenchable fire and down to a single, exhausted man standing in the rubble. Zerubbabel, the governor of Judah. Zechariah chapter 4, verse 6. Then he answered and spake unto me, saying, This is the word of the Lord unto Zerubbabel, saying, Not by might, nor by power, but by my spirit, saith the Lord of hosts. Read that again. This is one of the most quoted verses in the Old Testament. But we strip it of its terror when we pull it out of this chapter. The angel is not handing Zerubbabel a comforting bumper sticker. He is handing him a military strategy based entirely on the impossible machine burning behind them. Might and power. The Hebrew words here are chayil and koach. They mean armies. They mean human resources, wealth, swords, and physical leverage. Zerubbabel has none of these. He is surrounded by hostile nations actively plotting to stop the rebuilding of the temple. The opposition is so massive, so entrenched, that the angel literally calls it a mountain. Verse 7. Who art thou, O great mountain? Before Zerubbabel thou shalt become a plain, and he shall bring forth the headstone thereof with shoutings, crying, Grace, grace unto it. Picture it. A geographic impossibility, a literal mountain of political and physical resistance standing in the way of the foundation. And how does the governor level it? He doesn't. The Spirit does. The Yitzhar. The raw, uncrushed oil flowing from those two living trees is the very substance that flattens the earth. But watch what the text does next. The angel focuses on the weapon in Zerubbabel's hand. Zechariah 4:10. For who hath despised the day of small things? For they shall rejoice, and shall see the plummet in the hand of Zerubbabel with those 7. They are the eyes of the Lord, which run to and fro through the whole earth. Stop right there. A plummet. The Hebrew text reads, Ha-eben ha-bedil, the stone of tin. It is a builder's weight tied to a string. It is not a sword. It is not a spear. It is a tool of gravity and alignment. Tin is a base metal, cheap and heavy. The angel is deliberately contrasting this insignificant, dark piece of tin in a mortal's hand with the towering, flawless gold of the self-feeding menorah. Sit with that image. The golden bowl is pouring. The living trees are bleeding. The apocalypse is waiting in the wings. And right in the middle of it all, a man holds a piece of string to make sure a stone is laid straight. That is the point. The human hands do not have to fight the mountain. They only have to align with the plummet. The endless flow of the Yitzhar handles the resistance. But there is a terrifying detail buried in the back half of verse 10. The angel says that when Zerubbabel holds that tin weight, he is not building alone. He is being watched by those seven. The text explicitly links the seven lamps of the golden machine to seven eyes that are currently running violently across the surface of the earth. What exactly are those eyes? The Hebrew word for run to and fro is meshotatot. It implies an aggressive, sweeping patrol. These are not passive observers. The mountain of opposition is being scouted. The plummet in Zerubbabel's hand is intrinsically linked to a supernatural intelligence network. Zechariah is no longer just looking at a piece of temple furniture. He is looking at a living, watching entity. The heavy stone of tin drops, the mountain collapses into a plain, and the unquenchable oil flows. But the angel is about to reveal that the fire burning on top of that machine is not just light, it is a legion. How do seven golden lamps suddenly become seven ranging eyes? And what ancient text actually names the watchers who hold them? Look directly into the fire on top of the golden bowl. Zechariah is staring at seven burning lamps in the middle of a destroyed Jerusalem. But the angel has just shattered the illusion that these are merely wicks drawing oil. They are not inanimate fire. They are an active, living intelligence network. Zechariah 4:10, King James Version. The angel points to the seven flames and declares, "They are the eyes of the Lord, which run to and fro through the whole earth." Read that again. The English phrase run to and fro is translated from the Hebrew root shwot. It means to row, to push through resistance, to aggressively scour and rove. This is not passive observation from a distant heaven. This is a militant, boots-on-the-ground patrol. The seven lamps burning on the menorah are physically moving through the earth, gathering intel, mapping the resistance, and enforcing the will of the Spirit. But who exactly are these seven? To the modern Western mind, the eyes of the Lord is often flattened into poetic imagery for God's omniscience. But the ancient Jewish readers standing in the rubble of the Second Temple did not see a metaphor. They saw a terrifyingly specific angelic hierarchy. Turn to 1 Enoch, an ancient Jewish writing preserved whole in the Ethiopian Bible. This text dominated the theological imagination of the world Jesus walked into, including the men of the Qumran caves. And in Enoch chapter 20, the writer does not use vague poetry to describe the forces surrounding the throne. He provides a hyper-specific list. He names exactly seven holy angels who watch: Uriel, Raphael, Raguel, Michael, Sarachael, Gabriel, Remiel, seven watchers. Seven sentinels tasked with scouring the earth, executing judgment, and reporting back to the Lord of Spirits. I hold this as their telling, not as proven fact, but the Second Temple readers saw a direct, undeniable parallel here. The seven golden lamps on Zechariah's impossible machine are the seven archangels. Hold that image. The two olive trees, the sons of the fresh oil, are standing on the left and the right of the golden bowl. The uncrushed Yitzhar is bleeding through the pipes, and that wild, living fuel is powering the seven watchers who are sweeping violently across the broken earth to level the mountain of opposition standing in the way of the foundation stone. The machine is not just a lampstand, it is a war room. And it needs no human priest, because human hands cannot manage the raw fire of the angelic realm. Aaron and his sons are obsolete in the face of this structure. The heavy tin plummet drops. In Zerubbabel's hand, the seven watchers range across the globe, and the earthly resistance crumbles under the weight of an uncontainable spirit. But Zechariah's vision ends here in the dust of 520 BC. The prophet eventually dies. The stone temple is finished. The centuries grind on, and Rome eventually burns that sanctuary to the ground, taking the earthly menorah with it. The golden machine goes completely dark in the canonical text. For 500 years, the sons of the fresh oil disappear from the pages of Scripture, until a prisoner on the island of Patmos opens his eyes to the apocalypse. The ancient blueprint has been waiting in the dark, and it is about to violently resurrect on the bloodiest page of the New Testament. The two living trees are finally stepping out of the visionary shadows. What happens when the sons of fresh oil walk the streets of a dying city, and this time the fire flowing out of them is weaponized? The salt wind of Patmos, near the end of the 1st century, an exiled apostle named John is handed a measuring reed and commanded to measure a temple that no longer physically exists. Rome burned the Jerusalem sanctuary to the ground 2 decades earlier, in AD 70. The Roman legionnaires looted the holy place. They carried the heavy, hammered gold menorah through the streets of their capital as a war trophy. The earthly machine is gone, but the blueprint did not burn. Picture it. John is staring into a prophetic vision of a spiritually dead city, a place he explicitly calls Sodom and Egypt, where our Lord was crucified. And right there, in the blood-stained streets of the apocalypse, the sons of the fresh oil finally step out of the shadows. Revelation chapter 11, verses 3 and 4, in the King James Version. The voice from heaven declares, "And I will give power unto my 2 witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,263 days, clothed in sackcloth." These are the 2 olive trees, and the 2 candlesticks standing before the God of the earth. Read that again. John is not inventing new imagery. He is reaching 500 years into the past, grabbing Zechariah's impossible machine by the roots and planting it directly into the end of the world. The 2 olive trees, the dual conduits of the Yitzhar. But watch what the text does. The architecture has mutated. In Zechariah's day, there was 1 golden candlestick fed by 2 living trees. In Revelation, the men themselves are the candlesticks. The Greek word here is luchnia. It means a lampstand, a physical bearer of light. The uncrushed oil no longer flows into a metal bowl. The human conduits have become the fire itself, and this fire is no longer a quiet flame burning in a ruined post-exile temple. It is weaponized. Revelation 11:5. And if any man will hurt them, fire proceedeth out of their mouth and devoureth their enemies. And if any man will hurt them, he must in this manner be killed. Stop right there. The men of the Qumran caves waited in the desert for 2 messiahs. They expected military leaders with iron swords to overthrow the empire. They were wrong about the earthly weapons, but they were absolutely right about the 2 figures. The Yitzhar does not need a sword. The raw, living spirit is the violent force that levels the mountain. Look at the terrifying authority these 2 witnesses wield in verse 6. These have power to shut heaven, that it rain not in the days of their prophecy, and have power over waters to turn them to blood, and to smite the earth with all plagues, as often as they will, shutting the heavens, turning the water to blood, calling down plagues. To a 1st century Jewish reader, these are not random miracles. They are absolute historical fingerprints. Moses, the lawgiver who stood over a bleeding Nile. Elijah, the prophet who locked the sky for 3.5 years and called fire down on Mount Carmel. I hold this as one reading, not the final word, but the early church saw the unmistakable silhouettes of these 2 ancient heavyweights stepping back onto the earth. The self-feeding golden bowl from 520 BC was only a shadow. The heavy tin plummet in Zerubbabel's hand was only a dress rehearsal. Now, The watchers are done gathering intel. The two sons of the fresh oil are standing in a dying city, bypassing every earthly priest, executing the final judgment of the Lord of the whole earth. A violently powerful return, but a return that ends with their bodies lying dead in the street before the breath of life enters them again. The final section pulls us back from the edge of the apocalypse to the dusty foundation of Zechariah's Jerusalem. What was the true purpose of the unquenchable light, and why did God have to show it to a prophet surrounded by broken stones? Go back to the dead of night in the broken streets of Jerusalem. Zechariah is still standing in the rubble. The foundation of the second temple is barely a ring of stones in the dirt. He is staring at a machine of solid gold, a massive bowl hovering in the air, and two living olive trees bleeding directly into the fire. In the beginning, you saw an anomaly. You saw a lampstand that broke the ancient laws of Exodus, because it required no human hands to trim the wicks or crush the olives. You saw a Levitical ritual executing itself in the dark. But look at the machine now. The fire burning on top of that gold is not just light, it is a legion. The 7 lamps are the 7 eyes of the Lord, the ancient watchers of Enoch, aggressively sweeping across the earth to gather intel. The heavy tin plummet in the governor's hand is not just a building weight, it is the gravitational trigger that flattens the mountain of human empires. And the 2 trees are not just men of history, they are the Beni Ha-Yitzhar, the sons of the fresh oil, Zechariah 4:14. These are the 2 anointed ones that stand by the Lord of the whole earth. Read that again. When God woke Zechariah up in that graveyard of a city, he was not showing him the future of the earthly temple. He was showing him its replacement. Sit with that. The stone walls Zechariah was about to build would eventually rot from the inside out. The priesthood would become a political machine. The men of the Qumran caves would flee into the dead wilderness in disgust, waiting for the true messiahs of Aaron and Israel to finally arrive. And eventually, the Roman 10th Legion would march into the city, tear Zechariah's stonework down to the bedrock, and carry the earthly menorah away as a war trophy. God knew the building would fall. He knew the human priests of Aaron would fail. So he showed a terrified prophet a machine that Rome could not touch. The Yitzhar, the uncrushed, wild, living spirit of God. It bypasses the stone mortar. It bypasses the heavy clay jars. It flows directly from the Lord of the whole earth into the 2 witnesses who will stand in the final streets of John's apocalypse, weaponized and uncontainable. I hold this as one reading, not the final word, but the architecture spanning from the ruins of 520 BC through the brittle scrolls of the Dead Sea caves, straight into the fiery, plague-ridden streets of Revelation 11 is too precise to be an accident. The 2 trees are the same. The unquenchable fire is the same. The mystery resolves around a light that never needed human hands to survive. But a fraction of this blueprint remains hidden in the dark. We know the terrifying power these 2 witnesses hold, the power to shut the heavens and turn the water to blood. But the exact hour they step out of the shadows is a secret the desert is still holding. The earthly temple is gone, but the watchers are still ranging to and fro across the earth. The mountain of opposition is still standing. Somewhere, the sons of the fresh oil are waiting for the golden pipes to open. If you stayed until the fire caught, leave the word "watched" in the comments below so I know who walked the whole way. Subscribe to the channel to keep pulling at the threads of the forgotten architecture, and send this video directly to one person who loves the deep, apocalyptic mysteries of the text but has never heard the true translation of the sons of the fresh oil. The light was never meant to be contained by a building made by human hands.